Yeah?
What is intercultural communication?
Well, I've got the answer for you.
Intercultural communication was a topic I didn't really know that much about before I took this class. And when I took this class, I had a very different perspective of what it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more about like the stages of communication, like the delivery of the message, the obstacles that come through it, something like a typical speech class. But what I got from this experience is so much more. So we started off the year and we started with just what speech and communication is and what gets in the way with it. So from these, I got the basic understanding of how easy it is to misinterpret a message. And in today's society, I hadn't really recognized how much could be misunderstood through text messages. But when thinking about it and when asked to analyze my text, I was so surprised. See, a lot of times we use emojis and different types of things to express how we feel, but it's taking away that one-on-one personal contact, and it's also taking away from reading someone's emotions by interacting with them. So that was the first main thing that I really loved about it. Next, as we continued, we got into what we could do to improve our communication. And this was one of my favorite chapters, because when we were talking about how it's hard for people to listen and hard to put biases apart from one another, we had to watch a TED Talk video, and I remember as I was watching the TED Talk video, another video popped up. And it was actually about how there are two different people, they're placed in two different rooms, and they're both from England, and they're asked the same question of how would you react if your daughter got married to an African American. So me thinking of this question, I would think it's pretty normal because around me a lot of interracial marriages occur. But when asked these two people, both of them had very, very different opinions on what they would do. And the lady said that she would hate it for her daughter to marry an African American, but the man said he would be fine with it. So then next part of the study, they put them together, and when they put them together, they both basically fought it out, and they didn't even agree to disagree. They just were like, nope, I am not agreeing with what you have to say. I don't even consider what you have to say to be valid. And this is where I saw that link missing, where in order for us to be able to look at a different perspective and to learn something that we'll remember for the rest of our life, we had to gain that information. So when they put them in the opposite room and they kept arguing, no message was coming through, and all there was their brains battling it out. Instead of listening to what they had to say, they were thinking of the response and what they were going to say to combat the next attack. So that was very useful, and I used it in my day-to-day activities because I realized that I'm not a defensive person, but a lot of times when I am feeling a little attacked, I'll think of ways to defend my actions, when in reality, I don't need to defend my actions, but just think through before I actually make them. So that was the highlight. Next up, we talked about how there's different factors that contribute to prejudice and how we see a certain type of person. So when we were doing this chapter, I was thinking of my friend, and I talked about it in our discussions, and I saw a lot of people had similar problems where they didn't know how to approach people from different cultures. So freshman year in my high school, we had a senior who would take the bus, and she spoke Arabic, she would wear a hijab, and I always thought it was very pretty. And so one day there was no room on the bus, so I went and sat next to her, and I started talking to her, and I told her about how my mom's close friends, almost considered brothers, were also from the same place she was from, and she started talking about it, and she told me about how she felt a lot of prejudice, especially around when she wore her hijab and when it was the time of 9/11. So I hadn't really stopped to think about this from their perspective, because I know that there's a lot of racism directed towards them, and being a brown person myself, even though I'm from India, if you're brown, you're automatically considered some sort of terrorist. And there's nothing wrong with being Muslim, but having that preconception set up against both of you and just saying if you're brown, you're a terrorist is horrible. So when I was talking to her about all of this, I saw how difficult it was for her to even be seen as a regular, I guess, American, just because of that one piece of cloth. So when I was looking at this, I was looking at how much prejudice there is against different races and how humans tend to separate themselves into separate, distinct groups just so they can feel that one is superior from the other. So, it's been all these different factors from the class that I've been applying into how I treat people on a regular basis, how I think about people, and I'm more self-aware about my actions. Now, using all these factors at the same time, we were doing our student peer interviews with a student in Palestine. So my pen pal Ragad, who we've talked about and we've discussed earlier, showed me so much that I hadn't really thought about. As I mentioned during the video discussion, I used to think that Palestine was sort of a war zone and no one really did anything and everybody was scared for their lives, but he showed me that it's so much more. But then it also showed me another aspect of how much Americans don't know. And since we're so comfortable with looking at our phones and looking at social media and all of the news that are happening in the different countries, we don't take time to reach out and actually see if what we are being shown is always true. So that was very eye-opening, and that was my favorite part of this entire class. Along with interacting with the classmates and peers from the class, I loved having this opportunity to connect with someone in a foreign country who I hadn't really had much experience with. So overall, I am so thankful I took this class. I want to thank Professor Rai and my classmates for always being so supportive of my arguments or discussing what they believed to be right and true. I hadn't really met somebody from Vermont and seen how distinct me coming from El Paso, Texas was to someone coming from Burlington, Vermont. So it was very, very eye-opening. I will use everything I've learned for the rest of my life, especially when we go study abroad. And I want to make sure that I can make others feel comfortable, as well as reaching out of my comfort zone and trying to understand their culture, their religions, their language, and not just being comfortable because I am American and I can speak English. So overall, this class has taught me to empathize with others and not only to be comfortable with myself, but to help others and understand them. So thank you.